particular era of professional wrestling is the greatest era of professional wrestling of all time. Now, we can date back and take a look at the past history of, let's say, WrestleMania 1, which was in March of 1985, late March to be exact. Why was it very big back then, and what had culminated to what we see now? You had Cyndi Lauper. You had Mr. T, who was part of a tag team match against Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, with Hulk Hogan, of course, just really becoming the biggest superstar in America, and if not the entire world at the time. So as we go forward with that, obviously there were some highs and lows in between from WrestleMania 1 all the way to 40. There were some really big ones. There were some that were just really lackluster where they just did it in a small arena. And then there were some that was just huge beyond proportional belief. But either way, there was a bit of a slump with professional wrestling. And obviously, for those of you that don't know, I made a video about pro wrestling and how you are an MMA fan now, as opposed to when you were a kid, you were a professional wrestling fan, and the transition of that. I talk about that in a video that I did that I urge you guys to check out if you're wondering about full context of this entire discussion that I'm having with you. So pro wrestling right now is huge because let's look at it like this. You got Logan Paul, very famous. On top of that, his brand Prime was on the canvas of the ring. Very big for its brand. Here's another situation. The Rock, the biggest icon, not only a big icon, but also the biggest movie star in the world of acting, not just professional wrestling. He surpassed Hulk Hogan. And I'm talking about The Rock. And how was he able to do that? Well, for one, Hulk Hogan was only famous in terms of, well, you're a professional wrestler, so therefore we're going to put you in the movies. Okay? Whereas with The Rock, it was like, you're famous and you're not only a great actor, but you're perfect for Hollywood. So we're going to put you in movies not just for the sake of being a professional wrestler, but for the sake of being an actor. So completely different in the trajectory of Hulk Hogan as opposed to The Rock. So another thing that I think is really significant to take a look at, you got all these other big stars that are coming up in the world of professional wrestling. Undertaker stopping The Rock instead of Austin was a flop. Yes, it was. And that's another thing I wanted to discuss with you, and I'm glad you brought that up. So why did they use The Undertaker? Well, for one, it was literally the only replacement that they were able to have because maybe Stone Cold Steve Austin had injuries. Maybe perhaps Stone Cold Steve Austin was not able to come due to money negotiations. Because remember, TKO is owned and partnered up with the UFC, and you know how they get down with their payments towards their fighters. Maybe a little bit different if, let's say, they were to do a Saudi Arabia card where the Saudis will pull out all stops to make things happen, which also includes bringing Stone Cold Steve Austin into a particular show. But again, let's be honest, these Saudi Arabia cards are not as big as the actual WrestleMania itself that has lineage, has a particular history behind it. So once again, wrestling right now is at its all-time biggest, right? It would have even topped the whole entire scenario if you, let's say, put Bad Bunny into the mix. Because as you know, Bad Bunny is a big star himself in the music scene, but yet on top of that, man, the guy can wrestle. He can perform in there. He can do what is required of him and even some more when it comes to performance in the ring. And then on top of that, the younger guys that they're bringing up, they're not playing this whole game to where, let's say, they're allowing only the bigger guys, or let's say the guys that are more well known, to stay on top like they did in WCW and even in the older days of the WWE. If you notice, there's a lot of new names that they're putting out there. Like, for example, that guy, Damian Priest. Now, how awesome was that? And he was able to cash in his money in the bank. And by the way, if you're a casual fan of professional wrestling, you probably don't know who that guy is. You have no idea who he is. right? But he's a new guy and he's a world champion at that. So again, Trump 2024. Shout outs to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And well, I gotta tell you, you know what? He's probably the best choice right now in comparison to everybody else, right? But that's neither here or there. But we'll talk about his boy Vince into this particular subject as well, because obviously, as you know, that's also an important topic of this particular segment. So here it goes, right? They're giving everybody opportunities that really deserves it. Damian Priest deserved that opportunity. On top of that, that's not something they would have really done in an instant back in the days. But nowadays, they're sort of okay with that, right? Letting the young guys sort of take over in ways that they didn't allow in, let's say, the late 90s of WCW. Let's see, what is this about Tony Khan? Uh, Tony Khan using the backstage brawl footage from like a year ago to feud with a guy that's not even in a company, such as it is such a Russo move. So I think you're talking about Russo from WCW. Yeah, absolutely. Russo ruined that company at the time. Do you remember during the time he literally stripped everyone of the belt and resetted the whole entire league of WCW? Now, what's up with that? Other than the fact that you either have two reasons why you did that. Number one, you really thought that the whole entire product was failing, and due to that fact, you wanted to do something about it. So as a result, you decided you wanted to reset the whole company and perhaps maybe give opportunities to other people that otherwise would have never been able to have those opportunities. But when you're talking about Tony Khan, it's a weird situation because it's sort of like a kid who was in college, I'm sorry, who was in high school, moved to college, and that kid who remained in high school is still talking about old news while that college kid is doing other things with his life that has nothing to do with whatever he left behind. So, yes, that is what is going on with Tony Khan and CM Punk in that particular aspect, right? And by the way, I'm very surprised that I'm still able to talk about this because I got to disclose with you guys when it comes to professional wrestling, I'm literally a casual now. And let me tell you why. And this is the reason why I'm also doing this particular content. So, why am I a casual now in pro wrestling in the last couple of years? Well, for one, I have a video talking about that. Look at my video where I talk about how a lot of guys my age in their mid to late 30s were pro wrestling fans in the 90s. And then when they grew into adulthood, they became MMA fans for the reasons of they wanted realism. They wanted a little bit of an edgier entertainment. Well, now I'm back in the pro wrestling fold. You want to know why? Because look at what's going on. They're a little bit more edgy now. Now, look, here's the thing, right? As a Muslim guy, I got to tell you, I don't curse. But the fact that they curse in WWE, I love it. You want to know why? I'm going to tell you why I love it. Because it's real. Okay? It may not be my choice of words. I may not be the type to go and drop MF bombs or S bombs or even N bombs or anything like that because I have a little bit more of a conservative way of trying to talk, right? Because I just think it's a lot more classier that way. And not only that, I think it's Brian here said there's too much content now in the WWE to keep up. UFC has the right amount of content in term what it keeps leaving. A right amount of content, one or twice is enough. Okay, so I got to tell you, man, you believe it or not, a UFC card or a UFC a fight night every week consists of at least 7 hours to 10 hours a day. Okay, so I don't know if um the UFC does less, they do less shows, but their hours are a lot more. Think about it. Raw is 3 hours, SmackDown is 2 hours, and then maybe NXT shows and whatever other shows you have there, main event, maybe they last somewhere an hour or so. So 2 hours Raw, 5 hours SmackDown. Okay, so just about the same. No, really, watches early prelim. No one really watches early prelims, though. You're right. Well, I do. But obviously, that's the reason why I have an MMA page, right? But I know what you're saying. You're right. Not a lot of people watch prelims, so you're definitely right about that. Considering the fact that when you look at the live crowd in pay-per-views or in fight nights, man, I got to tell you, there's not a lot of guys that are sitting in their seats right at that time. So you got to think, yes, you're absolutely right about that. There's a lot of plausibility in that particular aspect that you're talking about. I'm going to pull over right here in the middle of the road so I can talk to you guys. This is the kind of randomness that I can offer to you guys in this particular channel. Look at this. Open, vast lands of Northern California right here. And I'm stopping right here, and I'm going to talk to you guys while I'm doing it. And what did Brian here say? Those are only on fight passes. Their weekly TVs are like 2 hours or so. Okay, so fair enough. You're absolutely correct on that. There's some plausibility to that comment that you made, right? Okay, so right now, I got to tell you guys, pro wrestling is at its biggest time ever, right? I had mentioned earlier in the stream, for those of you that are just joining us, I mentioned that, for one, Logan Paul is part of the whole WWE, so that's a plus for them. You got The Rock, who is the biggest actor in the world. By the way, not just the biggest actor in the world, but literally a guy who is bigger than everybody in Hollywood, not just a guy who transitioned into pro wrestling and into the world of Hollywood. Literally, the world of Hollywood and acting all together, right? I don't know if he won an Oscar or not, but that's neither here or there. And you know, those particular subjects are nothing more than subjective matters at hand and not really any true objectivity behind them. So, as a result, here's something I want you guys to understand, right? Now that pro wrestling, it is at its all-time big time, right? In terms of having a bigger audience, having a bigger draw, and people being able to watch now because of a particular interest. And the fact that Cody is now the world champion, I think that says a lot of volumes about what kind of business they have going on. Okay? For one, you got to understand what kind of business they have going on right now is the type of business where they're going to give everyone equal opportunity, right? They're going to give people that are talented a shot. Now, why is that important? It is important to have that simply because, let's just be honest, right? Over the years, when Vince McMahon was running the WWE, all he wanted to do was promote guys that look like Lex Luger, guys that look like Bobby Lashley, guys that look like basically straight bodybuilders. And here's a problem that I have with that. As somebody that practices mixed martial arts, right? And the fact that we've seen in mixed martial arts guys that look like CrossFitters beat up guys that are bodybuilders. This is the reality of fighting. So when you got somebody like Cody Rhodes, who, by the way, has an extensive high school wrestling background, it's not that hard to believe that this guy is a badass. I can buy it. Like, all right, you know what? You've wrestled, you've done real fighting to a certain degree, right? But again, in the MMA world, we don't really consider uh, wrestling or grappling fighting. You know, if you're talking about fighting, I mean, it's literally anything that deals with striking. So that's MMA, Muay Thai, kickboxing, boxing, all of the above, right? So as a result, here's something you have to understand about that. Cody Rhodes has a great storyline behind him, right? And I think a lot of people can get behind that. Now, is he going to be champion for as long as Roman Reigns? I don't know. I'm not an expert in professional wrestling to really understand. I'm literally talking to you guys from a casual observer point of view from professional wrestling. There was a point where I didn't miss any professional wrestling shows whatsoever. Back in 2009 and 2010, 11, 12, around there wasn't a show that I missed. I didn't miss a single show of professional wrestling. Now, why is that? The reason why I didn't miss a single show of professional wrestling was because I was really invested in that particular art or that particular performance. But over time, I just I just drew out of it because the UFC started building up a little more cards, right? They started building up more shows, more fight nights. And before you know it, Cody is overrated. People were invested in the chase. Yes, that's very true. Now that the story is finished, there's no real intrigue in him defending it. You're absolutely right about that. Absolutely right. Sort of like Conor McGregor, if you really think about it, right? That's the reason why he never defended his championships after he won them. He won the 145 undisputed champion, never defended it. So he went out and seeked different competitions. He moved up and fought Nate Diaz in a super fight, not really a title fight because Nate Diaz obviously can't fight for 145. And then after that, he went after the 155 belt and then never defended it because it was either him who didn't have any interest or people didn't really have any interest in him doing that, only to chase that particular story of being a double champ. And you're right, Brian. Cody Rhodes is in that same trajectory as a result of that. So you're right. Not a lot of high interest in that regard. What we got going on, though, with Cody Rhodes is a mystery based on what is going to happen next, and only Monday Night Raw and what we're going to see later today when Monday Night Raw commences is only going to be the beginning of the end of whatever championship run he has going on. I think that's the best way to really put it. Now, as you guys know, it is UFC 300 Fight Week. And being that it's UFC 300 Fight Week, you also got to understand this is big for the TKO company. They had Wrestlemania, which did really good. UFC 300, it doesn't have the same flair and the same attraction as, let's say, UFC. UFC 300 doesn't have the same attraction as WrestleMania 40. Now, why is that? Well, for one, Jamal Hill is not a big star. Alex Pereira is a big star, but he's only a big star depending on who he fights. And in particular, he does great numbers with Israel Adesanya. And that's not the case here. Now, the entire card of UFC 300 has intrigue, but I think UFC 300, the charm that you can really take out of it is this. Once the results and the event is over, you're going to realize how great the card was based on the performance that many of these fighters are going to put on for that card. So, in other words, you're going to be very surprised by such underrated card as UFC 300. But with WrestleMania 40, my goodness, these guys brought on everything for you guys. They brought on great competition. They brought on great storytelling. They brought on great athletes, and they brought on a great display of athleticism and showmanship. And as Triple H likes to say, the showcase of the immortals. Now, what's awesome about this is Vince McMahon is gone. Okay, do you think the UFC will adopt some WWE pageantry like Pride did? I think they should do stuff like that in big cards like UFC 300, make it seem special. All they do is change the colors canvas. Okay, so Brian, that's a very good point, right? Should they do pageantry? Well, the thing is, you got to ask Dana White that because Dana White doesn't like any of these things, right? He likes things to be plain. He likes things to sort of just be static, right? He likes static colors. For a long time, the UFC didn't really change having, let's say, STEM, that heavy metal song that was the entrance to all the pay-per-views. They never really changed any of that. So as a result, what you have going on is just a stagnant uh, uh, the UFC of nothing ever changing. Nothing factory that UFC is going with the WWE? No. But it doesn't mean that they won't use the UFC or the UFC to the way to promote whatever they have going on. Like, for example, for WrestleMania last night, I haven't been watching a professional wrestling setting. You know what they normally do, okay? But for some reason, they did that is. Uh, Obviously, it's because Michael Chandler went there to go call out Conor McGregor. And rightfully so. He's been extremely frustrated at the fact that he's been calling him out. He's been trying to get a fight, and he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know how this fight is going to happen or when this fight will happen. So he decided to use the UFC's partnership with the WWE to get into a WWE setting, get a microphone, and call him out. And why? Why did Michael Chandler do that? Well, the reason why Michael Chandler decided to do that is because he felt that he needed to find any platform that he could to get Conor McGregor's attention. And who better than the UFC using the WWE to do that? So now there's a lot of WWE fans that don't know who Michael Chandler is. They don't know a lot of the fighters that are in the roster. But the one thing you can count on is that they know who Conor McGregor is. If you're a WWE fan and you're a UFC fan, or if you're just a WWE fan and you're not a UFC fan, for sure you know who Conor McGregor is. So because you know who Conor McGregor is, you're going to wonder, who is this Michael Chandler guy calling out Conor McGregor? Why is he on Raw calling this dude out? Is it? Well, now you've created interest. So this is one way, in fact, that they sold you violence. So selling you violence sometimes is a whole lot better than, let's say, just selling you a whole bunch of individual products. And by the way, this is the reason why they pay fighters the way that they do. So now on to the next subject with Vince McMahon, right? I think Vince McMahon, quite honestly, is one of the reasons why many people were not watching the UFC. I'm sorry, we're not watching the WWE for a long time. He micromanaged the entire company. He would be in guerrilla stations in the back, barking orders, telling guys how to talk, telling guys how to do things, because he thought he knew the business better than everybody else. And really so, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but a part of me sort of thinks that the man was sort of out of touch with the common man and the modern wrestling fan base. So as a result, this is the reason why you have the best product you've ever experienced out of the UFC. I'm sorry, out of WWE. Because Vince McMahon is no longer around to dictate every little step and every little movement and letting the athletes do what the athletes do. Right? It's kind of like what Suge Knight said about P. Diddy. He said, if you don't want a producer all up in the videos, dancing, we're going to let the artist be the artist. Well, guess what? With Vince McMahon, he didn't let the artist be the artist. He was a micromanager. You guys ever worked for somebody that was a micromanager? I'm telling you, worst human beings to ever work for. They mean well. Sometimes they're micromanagers based on a little bit of their narcissistic personality disorders they have going on, which, by the way, makes your life a living hell. But it also really becomes inconducive to the mission statement of the entire company that you're working for. In other words, they do more damage than actual good when they micromanage whatever it is that you're doing. So this is something you really have to think about, right? Is it better that Vince McMahon is no longer in the company? And I'm going to tell you, yes, a whole lot better. You see, Triple H is sort of in a position right now where he's older than the younger talent, but he has a young, fresh mind in terms of, well, in the comparison to Vince McMahon. Okay, so he has new, fresh ideas. He stays in touch with the common man on top of keeping up with modern pop culture, which I think is sort of helpful to try to understand where the WWE is going to take their company into the next level. So, once again, this is the reason why pro wrestling right now, it's at its all-time high, and probably one of the best times to be a wrestling fan, and maybe even one of the best times to be a UFC fan, an MMA fan, and a boxing fan. All combat sports, all of them. Great time for everything. But I'm all here for it to cover it, and I hope you like and subscribe so I can continue covering all these great events and all these great matchups, but not only that, all these great storylines. So, yeah, I really stand by that. I think Vince McMahon being out of the way is really the best result for the UFC, the WWE, and TKO in general. And if you disagree, let me know. Do you think that Vince McMahon was a lot better for the WWE? I don't think so. And you want proof of that? Look up last night. Last night was the real indication that the WWE is way better without Vince McMahon. A whole lot better. And if anybody thinks otherwise, man, I challenge you on that notion. Because Vince is just way too old. He's too controlling. And not only that, I mean, look, I don't want to judge a man based on what he does in his personal life, but let's just be honest. He's a sick human being. And if you're a sick human being like that, what else are you capable of doing? So that's something you really have to keep in perspective when you're dealing with somebody like Vince McMahon. Also, the decisions that he's made over the past, you got to think good reasons for him to, let's say, let go of CM Punk, right? Because, by the way, this right here also is the vindication of CM Punk all the way. If you really want to think about it, CM Punk has been gone for 10 years, has had different journeys, went into MMA, went into AEW, and then came back. But you got to remember what made him leave in the first place when he dropped that pipe bomb back in the days. And now coming back to the golden age of professional wrestling. By the way, a vision that, quite frankly, CM Punk has always thought about, but also the same vision that somebody like Triple H, for a long time, really has thought about doing, but was really debilitated due to the fact that his father-in-law was in charge. So there wasn't really a lot that Triple H could do. Now, Triple H has all the authority. No pun intended to the storyline that he had a couple of years ago when he had the authority storyline, but he really does have the real life authority now. And Triple H comes from that era of D-Generation X. He knew that that particular era was big for professional wrestling. And there were reasons why it was big. It was edgy. It was uncut. And on top of that, people didn't care in terms of how they acted, right? They let it all hang. And that right there was the recipe for success. Now, you can never get back the Attitude Era, but right now, what you are doing is creating for a new company that is now under a new regime. And you got to give it up to Triple H. He's the ultimate boss of it all, right? Now imagine Cody Rhodes was the one who called him out at the end of the night, said, hey, none of this would have happened without Triple H. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing what I'm saying, right? Maybe not the exact words or so. But you also got to think back. Cody Rhodes made an effigy of Triple H when he was in AEW. And for those of you that don't have a high vocabulary and don't know what an effigy is, he created a symbol of a throne with a cross, an iron cross that is synonymous with Triple H. And he went into an AEW match, broke that chair just to symbolize his hatred for Triple H. And last night, all of that changed. So, once again, is it better that Vince is gone, or is it better that Vince should have stayed? I think you know the answer to that. And my humble opinion, I think that it is really a whole lot better that he is no longer part of this organization. And you know what? I understand that he's the one who owned it. He's the one who grown it. He's the one that was there when it was literally under federal investigation because Hulk Hogan snitched on Vince McMahon. And I understand that. But here's something you got to understand, though. At a certain point, you outgrow what you built. And who are some two examples that I can mention when it comes to outgrowing what you built? You guys know the rapper and the blues singer Everlast, right? What's interesting about Everlast? Everlast made a hit song called Jump Around. When he went to the Joe Rogan podcast, he said to Joe, you know what? A lot of people don't recognize me. A lot of people know the song Jump Around. Who doesn't know the song Jump Around? If you're a hip hop aficionado or even if you're a casual listener of hip hop, you know this song. You know Jump Around. Everybody knows Jump Around. But sometimes you don't even know who the guy is. You know what he said in the Joe Rogan podcast? He said, sometimes I feel like the song is not something that I own anymore. The universe owns it. Because I would be sitting at a random restaurant, people would hear this song and they have no idea that I'm the guy who made the song. And Conor McGregor is the same example of that. At a certain point, he outgrew his legacy. Yes, it was magical. Just like Cody Rhodes, to see him rise and finish the story of becoming a double undisputed champion. But after a while, it just became one of these situations where he became just very unpleasant to the majority of people around the world. And as a result, well, all of his past glories, it was like as if it doesn't belong to him anymore. And that literally is where Vince McMahon is at. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to end it from here. And I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed the card for WrestleMania. And we're also going to enjoy the card for UFC 300 with more coverage on that this week, inshallah. Like and subscribe.